Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 6th of March. So coming to the first article, it's time to reimagine South Asia. Now the context here is primarily about the spiraling down of India-Pakistan relations and how these adverse relations between these two countries have impacted the entire region of South Asia. So that is the context, and indeed the article is an important one. Now coming to the issues that have been analyzed, the first issue is with regards to integration between India and Pakistan. Now, the editorial discusses that despite the fact that these two countries are neighbors, they are one of the least integrated nations in the entire world. And this is something that is impacting the entire region. For example, economically, both nations have minimal contact. There is only a trade of approximately $3 billion. And this trade is equivalent to only 0.4% of India's global commerce. So in that respect, you can understand that how poor the relationship is economically. Also, socially, the relationship are not very integrated. Even people who have families across the border are unwilling to communicate with each other, primarily because they are fearing that they might be questioned by the security agencies. Recently, we had also seen that with regards to some Pakistani actors in Indian movies, there were a lot of objections in the country. And all of that has resulted in a situation where the integration between these two countries is almost nil. Even on sports events, we see that sometimes because of political reasons, cricket matches are cancelled between the two countries. So this scenario is something that is unwelcome. So that is what is analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to South Asian integration. I told you the impacts of Pakistan-India disintegration is something that is also seen in South Asia. Amongst all the regions in the world, South Asian region is one of the one of the least integrated regions. And despite the fact that this region has the largest population in the entire world, it also has the largest number of poor people. And despite this scenario, this vulnerability of this region continues to be poor, and the integration which is required for the development of this entire region is something that is not coming. So that is one analysis which has been made here. Another thing which you need to understand is with regards to the foreign policy. Now, this foreign policy is both of India and Pakistan. Now, for India, the foreign policy is that trade with Pakistan and terrorism is something that cannot take place together. And now in the present government, it is that talks and terrorism cannot take place together. So this is the policy that India is now following towards Pakistan. And this is the reason because of which talks is what has been suspended. As far as Pakistan is concerned, it also has an adverse foreign policy where it says that it will only engage with India once the Kashmir issue is resolved. So as a result of these foreign policies by both India and Pakistan, the relationship is not moving ahead, and that is the analysis here. Another thing which is important is with regards to the role of China. Now, at present, the role of China is largely viewed as a negative role. This is because China is warming up with Pakistan, and this is something that is not to the liking of India, and it is creating a distortion of power balance, and all of this scenario is something that is emerging in South Asia. A cold war is what is emerging between India and China in South Asia, and this is something that is detrimental to the entire region. But indeed, China has a positive role also. If it wants, it can play a positive role in South Asia. For example, through its Belt and Road Initiative and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, if China ensures that India also engages in these initiatives. At present, India is not engaging, primarily because India feels that its concerns are not being addressed. But if India is made a part of this initiative, then this entire South Asian region can develop holistically. And this is the gist of this particular article. Now, what is being said here is that if India engages along with other countries like Afghanistan, or for that matter, Iran and other Central Asian countries, then the concerns which India has that this initiative is largely to deter India can be done away with. Also, it will result in greater prosperity for this entire region, and this is something that China can enable in the or contribute in the development of South Asian region. So that is the analysis here. Another thing which is important is with regards to the prospects of integration. Now, what are the prospects? One prospect I have told you is with West Asian countries through Afghanistan, Iran and other Central Asian countries. Another prospect is that if China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, if it is renamed, India even has an issue with the name of this particular corridor. If India joins the CPEC, and this entire corridor is then renamed, and then this also further extends to the BCIM, which is the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar corridor. Then this entire South Asia can further get integrated, and that is what is the prospect of integration in this particular region. Another thing which is important here is with regards to the Quad infrastructure. Now this we had discussed a few days before also, that Quad, which comprises of 4 countries, that is India, it comprises of Japan, it comprises of Australia and the US. Now these 4 countries are coming up with an infrastructure project of their own. I told you that this entire region is in dire demand of infrastructure. So if these countries are also going to come as an alternative formula to the Belt and Road Initiative, this is somehow not going to be as beneficial to the South Asian region as the Belt and Road Initiative. Now the reason is that the Quad is intended to counter the Belt and Road Initiative, as a result of which 2 major countries, that is Pakistan and China, will be kept out of this infrastructure project of Quad. And if this is done, then again the integration of South Asia is something that cannot be achieved, and hence its full potential and progress will again be hindered. So that is what has been analyzed in this aspect of the editorial. Another thing which you need to know is some other benefits which India can avail by joining the Belt and Road Initiative and CPEC. Now the benefits are that India can get a land access to Afghanistan, and this is something that is very important. At present, India has no land access to Afghanistan because Pakistan is not allowing that. Definitely India has developed the Shah Bahar port in Iran, and that is an alternative route, but this alternative route is still not going to be as beneficial as a land route. So that is one benefit that India can get. Another benefit is with regards to the Tapi pipeline. Now this is a pipeline which is to pass through Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India, and this is a major pipeline. This can provide oil and natural gas to India. So that is one pipeline which can get a jump start if India participates and engages on the Belt Road Initiative and the CPEC. Another thing is that this will ensure greater development in the Kashmir Valley, which is at present suffering from militancy. So that can be one benefit. Another thing is that this entire region is impacted because of continuing war in Afghanistan. So if India engages in these initiatives and this entire region gets integrated, then some prosperity can also be given to Afghanistan, and that is going to be one benefit for India. Another thing is that this entire region is suffering from the malice of terrorism. And if this entire region gets connected, then terrorism can become a common concern for this entire region, and entire region can connectedly fight this menace, and that is what is going to be another benefit. So this is what is the analysis with regards to India-Pakistan relation and its impact on South Asia. India and its neighborhood will be very, very important for the 2018 mains. So that is going to be the relevance of this article. Now coming to the next article, opacity in the banking sector. Now the context is obvious, is the lack of transparency in the banking sector. This we are seeing in the backdrop of several scams. For example, the Punjab National Bank scam or the Rotomax scam, which has come to light. All of these are reflecting that indeed there is an issue of lack of transparency in the banking sector. So that is what is the background. Now coming to the issues. The first issue is with regards to the opacity. Now, where is this opaqueness present? This opaqueness is that something that we are seeing in the procedures of the banks. We are seeing in the supervisory controls of the banks. We are seeing in the regulatory procedures of the bank. All of this is resulting in a scenario where the banking system is entirely opaque. So that is something that has been highlighted in this particular editorial. The second issue is with regards to the RTI Act, and this is an important analysis. Now, here you need to understand that in the past, some citizens had applied for RTI information from the Reserve Bank of India, and this was something that the bank denied. The RBI denied giving this information, and this denial was made on 2 grounds. The first ground was a fiduciary relationship which exists between the RBI and the other banks. Now, a fiduciary relationship means a relationship of trust. It means that the RBI is acting as a trustee to these banks, and the RBI said that because it was a relationship of trust, RBI was not in a position to divulge information regarding the banks. So that is one ground. Another ground was that of public faith. Now, after the RBI denied that this information could not be given, this case went to the Chief Information Commissioner, who said the RBI was very much mandated to give this information. After the Chief Information Commissioner, the matter went to the High Court and finally to the Supreme Court. And it was the Supreme Court who gave a final judgment in the year 2015. And the Supreme Court, in its judgment, denied this claim by the RBI that it had a fiduciary responsibility towards the banks. The Supreme Court said that the relation that the RBI had with these banks was not a fiduciary one but a statutory one, which meant that it was based on certain laws. And as per these laws, this information is something that the RBI was mandatorily supposed to provide to the citizens of India. So that is something that the Supreme Court had said. Another thing with regards to public faith is something that is important. The Supreme Court had noted that it is the citizen who is the sovereign in this country. That means the citizen is supreme. So how can you say that public faith will be maintained if information is not provided to the head of the country, which is the citizen itself? So that is one claim which the Supreme Court had made, and it had said that the RBI was very much responsible for providing information under the RTI. So this is the history of RTI versus banking sector, and something about this is something that you should know. Another thing which is important is with regards to section 8(2) of the RTI. Now here you need to understand that RTI does have provisions in protecting the personal information of a particular person. However, the issue is that section 8(2) of the RTI states that whenever information divulging is something in public interest, and whenever public interest will outweigh the interest of a personal party, then in such a scenario, divulging of information is mandatory. And this is exactly what has happened in the present times, because even if the companies and the personal interest of companies like Rotomac, and for that matter, Mr. Nirav Modi's companies, is something that is going to be important. But in the backdrop of these scams, public interest is supreme to the personal interest of these people. And as a result of which, complete information of the frauds is something that the banks should divulge. And that is what has been analyzed under section 8(2) of RTI in this editorial. Another thing is the issue of elitism. Now here you need to understand that time and again the RBI and the government has said that it is only the right of the RBI and for that matter the government to have this information, and the confidence of the people should not be shaken in the banking sector, as a result of which this information is something that they will not divulge. And this is something that has been criticized as an elitism by both the RBI and the government, because they are not considering the citizen as the supreme. Now, as I've told you, the citizen being the sovereign can only be ensured of confidence in these institutions if there is transparency. If the banking sector is not going to have any transparency, then how can we say that the citizens will have any confidence in the banking sector? So that is one criticism which has been made against RBI and the government. So that is one analysis. Another thing which is very important is with regards to citizen as the watchdog. Now, you should note that the scam is something that is a criticism to the RBI itself, because the RBI is the regulatory body for all the banks. So what has been analyzed here is that when no regulatory body is going to be successful, there the most successful regulation is by the citizen himself, when the citizen themselves act as the watchdog. And this can only happen if the citizens are well informed that they can carry out this function of regulation on these institutions. And in this respect also, what is vital is that transparency is maintained and information as the right of the citizen is something that is ensured. So that is the analysis here. Another thing which is important is with regards to transparency in the banking sector. Now, this transparency in the banking sector is a work in progress. Definitely that is the case. But with the present scams, what needs to be done is that a mission mode transparency approach is what needs to be adopted. And the goal of complete and universal transparency in the banking sector is something that is indeed going to be needed to ensure that a complete overhaul of the banking sector is what is done. So that is the analysis here. Indeed, this issue with regards to banking sector is going to be important, and these ideas you can use as suggestions in your answer. So that is the relevance. Now coming to the next article, a gathering storm. Now the context here is with regards to the World Justice Project and the Rule of Law Index 2017 and 18 report. This is out. As per this report, 113 countries is what have been analyzed, and amongst these countries, India has got a rank of 62. This is a rank which is better than China, Pakistan, Myanmar, Bangladesh. And another thing that you need to know is that Denmark has topped this ranking. So this is something that is a fact that you need to know here. Another thing is that coming to the issues which have been highlighted in this editorial primarily, The first issue is with regards to the global scenario. Now, the author here is making a claim that globally there is a challenge to the human rights, which is something that is seen in majority of the countries. Some examples is what has been given. For example, in Turkey, we had even discussed an article on this. What has happened is that in Turkey in the year 2016, there was an attempted coup. And after this coup attempts in Turkey, the President Recep Erdogan in Turkey has taken a very harsh stand against rationalists. There are cases where where freedom of press is something that is curbed. Journalists are put behind bars. So there is a severe scenario of violation of human rights in Turkey. So that is one analysis which has been given. China is another country which has been talked about in this editorial. Another thing which has been talked about is with regards to the attitude that countries are having towards refugees. This is something that is even seen in modern countries like US and Australia. Some human rights of refugees is what are being violated. Also, issues of hate speech and hate crime, majoritarian attitudes are something that are on a rise globally. So that is one issue which has been highlighted in this editorial. Another thing which is important is with regards to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, this declaration, you need to know, was something that was made after the World War II. Now, it was primarily because of the gruesome erosion of human rights during the World War II, during the Holocaust in World War II and by Nazi Germany. So, in that backdrop, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights had come into being. But the issue today is that despite the noble cause of the UDHR and the several countries being signatory to this declaration, there are situations or a scenario where justice and equality is something that is eroded. So that is what has been analyzed in the editorial. Another thing that the editorial discusses is with regards to a thin line. Now, the author here says that there is a very minor and a very thin line which exists between some small degree of restriction and a broad clampdown on the rights. For example, the IT Act in India has a provision that some defamous statements towards another community is something that cannot be made. Now, often it is seen that this act was misused where simply for liking a particular comment made by another person, two girls were arrested. So such kind of scenarios show that how there is a very thin line between some justiciable checks by the government and some overdoing by the government. So that is the analysis which is important here. Another thing that the editorial discusses is that an environment where there is an ignoring of human rights or an environment where there is an acceptance of intolerance provides a fertile ground for further violation of human rights. And isn't this the environment which we are seeing in India? In India, intolerance is something that is on a rise, and that is one of the major concerns for our times. And if this is going unabated, if political voice is not coming against this, if civil society is not rising against this, then this might provide a fertile ground for further violation of human rights, and that is what has been analyzed here. Another thing is, which you should know in this particular editorial, is the infrastructure for human rights. Now, the infrastructure of human rights is something that begins from the ethics and moral standards that people impose upon themselves. This is something that is followed by some national laws which are there in a country. Another thing is with regards to some supra-regional courts. For example, the courts like African court, it is a human rights court for entire African continent. Such kind of courts are also seen in Europe. European courts are what are existing. And at an international level, at a global level, we know that we have the International Criminal Court of Justice. And this is the infrastructure for human rights violation. So that is something that has been discussed in the editorial. Another thing is that there is now being seen a disregard for global institutions. Now, this is what is the most important analysis here. You should know that the United Nations special representatives are often sent to countries where there are cases of violation of human rights. For example, recently they have been sent to Philippines. We also know that they were sent to Sri Lanka. They had also been sent to Myanmar because of the Rohingya issue. However, what is seen is that these countries are not respecting these special representatives, and these countries have been unwelcoming to these special representatives, and that is what is a cause of concern. Even the UN intervention in Syria is something that has failed to restore peace in this war-torn country of Syria. So what is being seen is that globally these institutions are getting weakened, and what is warranted is that these institutions are what are strengthened so that human rights can exist. So that is what is the analysis here. The issue will become important from social issues perspective in General Studies paper 1. So that is going to be the relevance here. Now coming to the next article, high noon. Now the context here is that the India's Meteorological Department has recently given a forecast as per which the temperatures will be there will be above normal maximum and minimum temperatures across the country during the pre-monsoon season, which includes the months from March to May. So this is something that you need to know. Another thing which is important is that you need to know what is a heat wave. A definition of heat wave is something that you should have some clarity about. A heat wave is a prolonged period of abnormally hot weather, and simply in this term you can describe heat wave. It does not have very technical aspects because the temperatures will be higher than what normally exists. So that is something that you need to know. However, some temperature definition is also what is given. For example, in plains, a minimum temperature should be 40 degree. If temperature is above 40 degree and then it is away from normal, then only it will be considered as a heat wave. If temperature is below 40 degree, then it will not be considered as a heat wave. And for hills, this temperature limit is 30 degree. So that is something that you need to know in the background aspect. Now coming to the issues which have been discussed. The first issue is with regards to the impact of this heat wave in India in specific. Now here you need to know that in India, it is millions of Indians who are going to get impacted because of this heat wave. And more so in India, the people in this regions of heat wave are people who are living in some deprived conditions, and there are also citizens who are constituting a risk group. For example, senior citizens form a risk group, children are more vulnerable, the disabled are more vulnerable. So the impacts in India of a heat wave are huge, and that is what has been analyzed here. Another thing is something that you need to know, some geographic fact, that the regions in India which are more impacted are the western states and the central Indian states. So this is just a geographical fact. Another thing that you need to know in the analysis is the public health challenge that is going to emerge in the backdrop of a heat wave. Now what happens is that initially what happens because of a heat wave is dehydration that happens. This is the first stage of a health challenge. This is followed by heat wave cramps. Now what happens in cramps is that a person experiences fainting, and this is followed by exhaustion. This is the next stage. So this is something that is important. In exhaustion, what happens is that the person feels dizzy, one feels nauseatic, vomiting. These are the symptoms of this stage of exhaustion. And this is followed by the last stage, which is that of a heat stroke. In the heat stroke stage, the body temperature rises to more than 40 degree, and this is largely a fatal stage. Often this results in seizures and coma, and this is the stage which is the most vulnerable one, where large number of deaths is what happens. So coming from this heat stroke is the heat wave mortality. Now what has been analyzed here is that since the year 2010 to the year 2015, approximately 2,500 heat wave deaths is what has been witnessed in the country, and this is a major figure. So that is one cause of concern. Another thing which has been analyzed is with regards to preparedness. Now if this is the scenario where the situation is so bad for India, then definitely some preparedness in this regard is warranted. This preparedness has to come from two areas. One is from the government, and the second is from the health system itself. Now what the government needs to do is that the government should ensure some daily alerts. It should warn the people against, it should ensure that there is a reduced exposure of citizens to the heat waves. This is what the government can do, and simultaneously the health infrastructure should be prepared to meet cases of heat strokes, heat cramps, and heat exhaustion. So this is something that is important in the preparedness aspect. Another thing that is important with regards to the heat wave is the water stress that often emerges. This water stress is something that the government is often seen to be not prepared with, and this is another aspect with regards to preparedness, where the citizens and the government should be prepared with the water stress that might emerge. So that is one issue. Another thing which is very important is with regards to some long-term measures. The long-term measures would include climate change mitigation, Reducing of greenhouse gases in the country, more and more forest cover and more plantations can ensure that heat waves are less in number. So that is the issue which can be, these are the steps which can be taken for long-term redressal of heat waves. So that is the analysis here. This question of heat waves, you can very much expect a question in the general studies paper 1. So that is what is important here. Now, based on today's discussion, please try and attempt these questions within a word limit of 150 words. So with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow.